So this training is on prompting. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what that is and what that looks like in teaching. So there's going to be two parts to this video. There will be me talking through what prompting is and the types of prompts, and then we're going to do a little modeling video so you guys can kind of see what those look like in action. So prompting is exactly what it sounds like. It is a supplemental stimulus that helps guide a child to engage in the correct behavior. So you see this a lot, especially if you've observed us in the clinic. Our goal is to teach a child a skill to help set them up for success. So when we start teaching, we always do what we call a probe, and it's basically to test whether or not the child has a skill. If it's not consistent, or if we think the child doesn't know what we're asking of them, then we go ahead and start teaching and prompting. When we're teaching, we prompt because we always assume that the child doesn't have the skill because it reduces frustration. So we see a significant decrease in challenging behavior when we're prompting right away because it helps set them up for success. So we provide a prompt to where we know the child is going to get it right. And then we provide praise and reinforcement for correct responses. So then that way they associate with whatever skill it was that they just did, they associate it with good things. And that's what we want. And then we work towards fading our prompts to where the child is now independent with this skill without our support. So we have what we call a prompt hierarchy. So when we're teaching, we typically would go from most intrusive to least intrusive as we're fading. The most intrusive prompt is full physical. So it's pretty much like it sounds. We are hand over hand prompting the correct response. So if we're teaching a child to give me the car, we may hand over hand prompt the child to grab the car and place it in our hands. And then we would throw a party. Yay, you gave me the car. So then though we're essentially doing it for them, we're basically showing them the response that we're looking for. Not all kids tolerate full physical prompting, and that's okay. For those kids that don't, we typically don't go that route. And we kind of try to, if that's going to be what makes them most successful, we may work on building tolerance. But we always choose a prompt level that the child is tolerant with and also successful with. So full physical prompt, like I said, is basically doing it for them. Partial physical prompt is still a physical prompt, but less intrusive. So we're kind of working on fading out our guidance. So in that example of give me the car, rather than hand over hand doing everything for them, we may be guiding them at the elbow to go point their hand in the direction of the car, and then we may hold out our hand and gently guide their elbow to place the item in our hand. So it's a little bit less intrusive, but it's also still providing some type of physical guidance. And basically our rule of thumb is anytime that you have any physical interaction with your child. So if you're touching them in any way, we typically would classify that as a physical prompt. Gestural prompt is another very common one that we use, and it's less intrusive than a physical prompt. And that is exactly like it sounds. It's just pointing to the item. So if we're saying, give me the car, we might point to the car for them to know, where to go to get the item. And then we might point to our hand to show that we want them to put it in our hand. So anytime you're using a point as an indicator of what you want the child to do, then that would be an example of a gestural prompt. And then a model prompt is similar to gestural in terms of intrusiveness. But with a model prompt, the child has to have some type of imitation skills to be able to use a model prompt. So in this scenario, we're modeling what we want them to do. So back to the example of give me the car, I may have Avery get the car and give it to me, and then say like, okay, do what she did, and then have the child imitate what Avery did by giving me the car. So those are the 4 main prompts that we would utilize in our prompt hierarchy. There are other types of prompts that we use here and there depending on how functional it is for the child. So sometimes we might use a visual prompt. So we might say, go get the car and hold up a picture of a car to help support, like, they look at the picture, see like, oh, they want the car. So then they go and get the correct thing. A textual prompt is also something that we utilize. So if your kid can read, we might hold up a word that says car. So again, they look at it, read it, and like, oh, they want me to get the car. And then they go and get that for you. A proximity prompt is also something that we utilize. So if we're holding up 2 pictures, one is the car and one is a ball, we might say which one's the car and put the car picture closer so they're more likely to select that one. That's pretty much it. Another one that we utilize is a visual prompt. I talked about that a little bit, but another example in this scenario is I might take like a highly preferred item and have the child track it to the car. So then that way, like, we're working on like the visual tracking and scanning skills as well, and they're following a preferred item with the intent to fade the preferred item out. And then we do have a couple of prompts that are used for like instruction following and imitating words. So again, we work on this to help facilitate like words and things like that. So one of the prompts is called an echoic prompt. So we have a full echoic and a partial echoic. So echoic just means that we're basically giving them the word to say. Again, for this, the child would have to have some type of vocal imitation repertoire, which typically we work on pretty early on in programs to kind of start to establish this so we can start to work on forming words and functionality of that and things like that. So an example would be if we were holding up a picture of a car and saying, what is it? And we want the child to say car, we would say car. So then they imitate the word car. So it's basically, again, just giving them the word to say, and we want them to imitate it. And then next step would be partial echoic. So we only use this for kids who are successful with it. So in this example, we would say, what is it? And then the child would say car. So the k is kind of like a little hint that we want them to say car. Sometimes the kid will just imitate k instead of actually car. So for those kids who will do that, we just typically skip over the partial echoic piece, and it's either full echoic or nothing. And then last but not least is verbal prompts. So this is when we want the child to do something, but they need to follow an instruction to do so. So an example would be after the child is done going to the bathroom, we want that to be a trigger that now we wash our hands because we just went to the bathroom. And that may not be laid as a foundation yet. So we may, after they're done going to the bathroom, we might say, okay, time to wash your hands. And that would be a verbal prompt because they're listening to that and then following the instruction to go wash their hands. Honestly, in the clinic, we avoid verbal prompting because it's harder to fade out than any of those other types of prompts that I listed. So in that scenario that I just provided in the bathroom, we may do more so like child's done going to the bathroom. Now we hold up a picture of washing hands. So that would be a visual prompt, and that's easier to fade than our words, because oftentimes kids get very dependent on an adult guiding them through instructions. And then also that requires you to be standing there coaching them through what the routine is, as opposed to if they had a picture, we could hang a picture on the wall and then teach the child to look at the picture so they know, like, oh, okay, I just went to the bathroom, now I wash my hands with no adult present. So it really helps facilitate the independence piece. So that's the gist of the prompts that we utilize. In terms of fading, like I said, we would kind of choose one that the child is most successful with. We use a general rule of 3 in the clinic to fade prompts, but really it's so child specific that it's hard to, say like, okay, do 3 and then your child's going to get it on that 4th. We kind of use that as a guideline to teach new techs coming in to know that we want to fade our prompts. So we always don't want to be guiding hand over hand to teach these skills. So typically, like I said, we would do a probe when we start teaching something. So if we notice that, when I provide a gestural prompt, they're getting it every time, then we're going to start with a gestural prompt. So we kind of already blew over full physical and partial physical. They know the drill a little bit. So we're going to skip over those and start with the least intrusive prompt that they need to still be successful. So if we're teaching something with a gestural prompt, so I might say like touch car, point to the car, they touch the car. Yeah, that's the car. Then I would do that 3 times. So I would preemptively assume that they need a prompt 3 times. So then I would do it again. Where's the car? Provide a point. So then right there, they're like moving along. And then on the 4th time, because I prompted 3 times now, I would say, where's the car? And kind of like see what they do. If the child starts pointing towards not the car, then I would terminate what I'm doing and then go back to it and go back to my gestural prompt. So that tells me that I'm not quite ready to fade my prompts yet. And it's all about reading your child and reading your child's cues. Like, you can see if your child is confidently tapping the correct one or emitting the correct response. But if they're like so way far, like you're still having to prompt a lot, then it's okay to continue prompting and not try to fade on that 3rd try. But it's kind of about balance too. We don't want to fade our prompts too quickly because that leads to a lot of errors, which, I talked about the purpose of prompting is to eliminate frustration, which is by reducing errors. We all want to get the answer right? So that's kind of the foundation that we're working on with our child. But also too, we don't want to over prompt and do everything for them because we're now not eliciting independence, and we're now facilitating what we call prompt dependency. So of course, if someone's going to do it for me, I'm going to let them, so we want to make it more motivating for them to do, to get the correct response by themselves. And we have those kids who want to get it right by themselves. I actually have one of each of my own. My strong-willed, independent girl wants to do everything right and wants to do everything by herself, but my boy will let me do everything for him all the time. So I think it's a matter of, what type of personality type you have with your kid. Do they want to be the independent one, or would they, if you're going to do it for me, sure, So that's something you want to be mindful of too when choosing your prompts and knowing when to fade your prompts, because, again, we don't want to establish prompt dependency for a child who's ready to start to engage in some independence. And we also, like I said, don't want to fade too soon. So that's kind of the gist on prompting and prompt fading. Like I said, there's going to be a second part, so I will come back with another part later. Thanks. Hi guys, this is part 2 of our prompting video. So I have my little helper here just so I can kind of show you, oh, here's my other helper, this is Bear. Our other part just to kind of show you guys what prompting looks like in action and what prompt fading looks like. So our first prompt that we talked about was a full physical prompt. Here, can you sit up for me? Up. All right. So if we're teaching a child to identify, say, what her nose is, then I would provide the instruction. So I would say touch nose, and she's not responding. So now what I would do is I would hand over hand prompt her, yeah, that's touching your nose. So that was a full physical prompt because I hand over hand prompted her to touch her nose. A partial physical prompt is where we start to fade a little bit. So that's where I would say touch nose, and she's not doing it. So I would maybe provide guidance at her elbow, and then she finishes it for me. Touch your nose. Yeah. So then there I kind of faded a little bit, and then she did the rest by herself, obviously with some coaching from me. And then a gestural prompt is what we talked about, that's pointing. So, sit up, honey. All right, so I would say touch nose, and then I would point to her nose, touch your nose. And then she does it. So I'm showing her what exactly to do by pointing to her nose. And then the last one that we would utilize is a model prompt. So I would say touch nose. Good, that's touching your nose. So I modeled it for her. I did it on my own nose, and then she looked at me and imitated what I was doing. So that's an example of a model prompt. When we're teaching vocalizations, we talked about an echoic prompt, and that's using the full word to say what I'm saying. So I would say, what is it? Ball.
Ball.
Yeah, that's a ball. So that's an echoic prompt because I said the full word ball and she imitated it. And then this is a partial echoic. What is it?
Ball.
Ball. Very good. So I said buh and she said ball. So she finished what I was saying, but I didn't say the whole word for her. So those are the standard ones that we would utilize when we're teaching lessons to increase vocalizations. Another one that I want to demonstrate, because this is a big question that I get, is a visual prompt, which can be utilized in a couple of different ways. So one example that you could use a visual prompt is as a skill that we're teaching her how to answer a question. So I might say, Avery, what's something that you can bounce?
Ball.
A ball. You can bounce a ball. So in that scenario, I didn't say or give her an answer. I just provided her with the item and she labeled it, but it correctly answered my question. So that would be an example of a visual prompt. Another way that we could utilize a visual prompt is for teaching a child to respond to their name. So if I said Avery, and then she's looking at the ball and I track it to my eyes, that's a visual prompt because her eyes are focused on the ball, but I'm teaching her the response of the eye contact that I want to see from her. And lastly, I just kind of want to show you, can you stand up for me for a second? Some examples of physical guidance of teaching discrimination skills. Actually, I'm going to have you sit down. Sorry, love. Here, sit down. Okay. So in this example, we might teach, give me the ball, and I have the ball in the tablet. So I might say, give me ball, and then I provide a physical prompt for her to pick it up and then give it to me. Yeah, that's the ball. And then a physical prompt or a partial physical prompt would be kind of fading that a little bit. Give me the ball. So I kind of just gently guide her. You can do the rest. And then she gets the ball. And then lastly, a gestural, give me the ball.
Give me the ball.
That's giving me the ball. So then I just pointed and she kind of gave it to me. And then 2, if you are teaching like an actual physical response, like, hey, go get the ball. Yeah, good job, girl. So there I kind of like physically guided her in the direction of where the ball is. So that would be another example of a physical prompt that you might utilize. And then next, I just want to show you really quickly how to fade your prompts. So I talked about rule of 3 to kind of try to test out your fading. So obviously, like I said, this is kind of like a role playing thing, so it's not an actual teaching scenario. I'm going to scooch you in so people can see you, okay? So I'm just going to show you, I'm going to fade from a full echoic prompt to a partial echoic prompt to an independent response. So that you can kind of see like what our fading process looks like. All right, ready? What is it? Ball.
Ball.
Yeah, that's a ball. What is it? Ball.
Ball.
Yeah, that's a ball. What is it?
Ball.
Good. That is a ball. What is it?
Ball.
Very good, girlfriend. So usually we would follow our rule of 3 and I would probably do an echoic prompt. But you might have seen that she kind of started to say ball on my second one. So I just went ahead and faded to a partial echoic after the second one. But it's good to kind of keep the momentum going and try to fade in the moment. So then that way, you know, you already have the momentum and you're kind of teaching whether or not your prompt transferred to an independent response. So that's part 2. I just wanted to kind of show you in action what all of those different prompts looked like and the prompt fading piece. So thank you guys.